Hi everyone, this is Cody Smith. Welcome to my channel, Cody Smith Pure Sport with Christ. Today I want to talk about chapter 2 of my book where I go in deeper about what my disability is, and a lot of this medical information I'm about to give you comes from the Birth Injury Justice Center, which I'll leave the link to the article from it in the description of this video so that you can have all the materials that I'm using. And the point is, it's a cerebral palsy is not one disability, it's a group of disabilities that affect movement and sometimes can have some intellectual issues connected with it. In my case, I have what's called spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy, which means that it affects all four limbs, and in my case, due to the brain bleeds, the bleeding was worse on the left side of the brain, which means that my right side is more affected and weaker in my body because each side of the brain controls the opposite side of the body, and it was in my motor cortex. So it's spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy, which means I have what's called spasticity, which kind of like, I guess you could say, stiffens the muscles, making it harder to move and more rigid and things like that. I don't really know an exact definition of spasticity itself, but that's basically how it works. So that is the case, and again, to deal with that, I've been through several surgeries and also therapy, and so it's kind of been, going through one day at a time. Like as a child going through elementary school, I would do therapy at a clinic and at school, where we would be looking through what am I doing, what sort of accommodations do I need to be able to do this task, what sort of exercises do I need to do, strengthen the muscles, because the way I look at it, there's what I like to call a misconnection. Misconnection, not disconnection, but misconnection between the brain and the body, because mentally I know what to do and how to do it, but physically moving, my body could be activating the wrong muscles to do this activity. So I have to rethink it and figure out, okay, what am I going to do so that I can trigger the correct muscles, and how do I work with it to strengthen them and to make sure that I have I'm able to do this activity by myself. How do I adjust my methods so that I'm able to do this myself without putting too much strain or, you know, pressure on my body and my muscles, because I'm trying to reduce the possibility of me getting hurt doing this activity, no matter what it is. I'm trying to make sure I'm doing it in a way where I'm able to keep pace with everyone else. So I kind of have to rethink my tactics. And in my case, mentally, I'm fine, except for having been diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 12, which I'm taking medication for, so that's completely under control. And epilepsy is a disorder where the person has seizures, and seizures are a disruption in the brain waves, kind of like metaphorically the brain receiving an electric shock, and depending on the severity of that, it has its different levels of severity, and the worst they call grand mal could potentially kill me, to be completely honest, because that'd be almost like getting struck by a bolt of lightning in the brain and things like that. But mentally I'm healthy, and physically I spent many years working on those things, figuring out, okay, what's the problem and what's the best thing I can do about it. Okay, what's going on? How was this a problem? And what do I do to work around it? And that's basically how I've spent my entire life from childhood, whether it be I need somebody else's help. Maybe I'm taking a test and I need a little extra time because I'm not writing as fast. Even though I can read and write, I don't physically do it very fast. And that's just a given. That's just something I've had to deal with all my life. I know how to read and write perfectly fine, but physically doing it is just, I have to do it at a slower pace. Or maybe sometimes I'll look the book up on YouTube and just listen to it or something. Or when I was in school, sometimes they would give me my textbooks in an audiobook form or something. Or when I was in elementary school, they would give me two copies of my textbooks where I would be, I'd have a copy to keep at home and use. I also have a copy to keep with me in the classroom to use, so I'm not having to carry them back and forth and back and forth, as an accommodation and those sorts of things. So, and when I was in kindergarten, that's when I had the dorsal rhizotomy that I mentioned earlier in the last chapter. So I went to kindergarten, then I left after the first semester, had the selective dorsal rhizotomy, and spent the second semester of kindergarten out in recovery, so I had to repeat kindergarten. But other than that, I've never been out of school that long for surgery. So that's really the only thing that was taking a long time. But other than that, I did daily and weekly therapy to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? And like I said, I did horseback riding therapy, and I even got into things like karate and different things to help me, strengthen my muscles and be able to, make sure I'm using the proper muscles and activating the proper muscles while I try to do an activity, and, finding the right tools to use, which of course will take time and trial and error because we have to figure out, okay, what works best for me personally. And that's the same with everyone, no matter if you have a disability or not. You're an individual person with your own strengths, your own weaknesses, your own free will, and everything else. So no matter how you do the task, you have to figure out what works best for me as a person, and then go out and seek that and use those methods. And then that is basically how I spent my entire life, is doing that and making sure I had that. And that's the same for every other human being. And that's a way in which, people with and without disabilities are no different, because we're all equally human. We just do things differently based on our personal circumstances. And that's all a disability is a personal circumstance that we really had no say in or control over. And I'm going to give you a bit more scientific information about mine, so that, hopefully that will increase understanding. And I just want everyone to know that this doesn't change the fact that I'm fully human. nor does any other disability change the fact that anybody else is fully human. And that is what really matters. And thanks, everyone. Please like, share, subscribe, and feel free to leave questions and comments. Hope everyone has a great day. Thanks, everyone.